There was no warm meal on the table. There was no cat asleep beside the stove. The lifeboat was gone. Almost everything you have been told about the Mary Celeste was invented, and we know exactly who invented it. This is the most famous ghost ship in history, and the strange part is that the court record exists. It has existed since 1873. It is not hidden and it is not lost, and it says close to the opposite of the story you have heard. The men who boarded that ship wrote down what they saw within days of seeing it, under oath, in front of a judge, and none of it involves a half-eaten breakfast. Before this is over you will know which novelist invented the warm meal, in which magazine, and in which year. You will also know the name of the man who invented half the crew. Start with what is true. The Mary Celeste left New York on the 7th of November, 1872, bound for Genoa. Her master was Benjamin Spooner Briggs, 37 years old, a New England captain from a family of captains. He did not drink. He read on deck. He had brought his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia with him, and had left their 7-year-old son Arthur behind in Massachusetts, at school. There were 7 crew, and the crew were experienced men. The cargo was 1,701 barrels of raw industrial alcohol, and that cargo is going to matter more than anything else in this story. On the 5th of December, the British brigantine Dei Gratia sighted her, drifting, roughly 600 miles west of Portugal. Her captain, David Morehouse, knew Briggs. The two men had dined together in New York a few weeks earlier. Morehouse sent his first mate, Oliver Devoe, across in a small boat to find out what was wrong. Devoe climbed aboard and found nobody. He then spent hours going through that ship, and 2 weeks later he described what he had seen to a court in Gibraltar. Here is his list, and I want you to keep score. There was nothing to eat and nothing to drink on the cabin table. No half-finished cups of anything. The galley stove had been knocked out of its place. The pots and the kettle had been washed about, and there was a foot or two of seawater standing in the galley. The sails were not neatly set. The foresail and the upper topsail were gone, torn away, and only the lower topsail, the jib and the foretopmast staysail were still drawing. The main hatch was secure, but the forward hatch and the lazarette hatch stood open, their covers lying on the deck beside them. There was about 3.5 feet of water in the hold, which Devoe called a great deal, but nowhere near enough to sink her. The ship's papers were missing. So was the chronometer. So was the sextant. So was the navigation book. And the single lifeboat, a yawl that had been lashed across the main hatch, was gone. Sit with that last sentence, because it is the whole case. A crew that vanishes leaves its boat behind. A crew that leaves takes it. The Mary Celeste was not emptied by something unexplainable. She was left, deliberately, by 9 people who climbed into a boat and took their papers and their instruments with them. And there is one more thing, which almost nobody ever mentions, and which turns out to be the key to everything. The ship's bilge pump had been taken apart. A sounding rod was lying on the deck beside it. The last entry on the log slate was made at 8 in the morning on the 25th of November. It records that the eastern point of Santa Maria, in the Azores, bore 6 miles south-southwest. That was 9 days before Devoe climbed aboard. That is what the record says. Now watch where the story you know actually comes from. The salvage hearing opened in Gibraltar on the 17th of December, 1872, before the Vice Admiralty Court. It was not a formality, because the Queen's proctor, a man named Frederick Solly Flood, had already decided that this was a crime. He accused almost everybody. He argued that the crew of the Mary Celeste had broken into the alcohol, murdered the Briggs family, faked damage to the bows, and fled. He then argued that Morehouse and Devoe had staged the entire thing to inflate a salvage claim. He found marks on the deck and on a sword in the captain's cabin and announced that they were bloodstains. They were analyzed. They were not blood. He sent a diver named Riccardo Porcinato down to inspect the hull, and Porcinato found no damage. After 3 months the court found no evidence of foul play whatsoever, and then awarded the salvors about 1/6 of the ship's insured value, which is a notably small share, and a fairly clear signal that the judge was not enjoying himself. So the official inquiry produced nothing at all. Now watch the legend get built, brick by brick. In January 1884, Cornhill magazine published an anonymous short story titled J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. In it, a ship is found in perfect order. Her boats are still aboard. A meal sits untouched on the table. The author was a 24-year-old doctor named Arthur Conan Doyle, 4 years before he invented Sherlock Holmes. He also misspelled the ship's name as Mary Celeste, and that misspelling is still repeated today, on television, by people who believe they are quoting a document. Readers took the story for fact. The Boston Herald reprinted parts of it as news. Solly Flood, still alive and still furious, denounced it in writing as a fabrication from beginning to end. Nobody was listening to him by then. In 1913, the Strand magazine published the memoir of a survivor named Abel Fosdick. There was no Abel Fosdick. And in 1929, a writer named Lawrence Keating published a book containing the confession of the last living crewman of the Mary Celeste, a sailor called John Pemberton. There was no John Pemberton. Keating invented him. He also invented 3 more crewmen, and a previous name for the ship, and the man who built her. When he was challenged to produce Pemberton, he could not. Pemberton is still quoted in documentaries. Strip all of it away, and the evidence points somewhere very specific. 1,701 barrels of alcohol went into that hold in New York. When the cargo was finally unloaded in Genoa, 9 of them were empty. Those 9 were made of red oak. The rest were white oak. Red oak is more porous, and it leaks. Now put that beside the rest of it. The Mary Celeste had carried coal on a previous voyage, and coal dust fouls a bilge pump. Her pump was in pieces on the deck. Which means that on the morning of the 25th of November, Benjamin Briggs could not measure how much water was in his own hold. He had 3.5 feet of it somewhere beneath him that he could hear and could not sound, and he had 9 barrels of raw alcohol venting fumes upward, through a forward hatch that was standing open, out of a hold he could not inspect. Alcohol vapor does not need a flame to frighten a competent captain. It needs only the possibility of one. And he was lost. Reconstruction of his last recorded position against the ship's drift indicates that Briggs believed he was roughly 120 miles from where he actually was. He thought Santa Maria was within reach. He was wrong about that too. The evidence points to this. Briggs, hearing water he could not measure, smelling fumes he could not vent, and believing land was close, put his wife, his daughter and his crew into the yawl and towed it behind the ship on a long line, intending to wait, and to reboard if nothing happened. The line parted. It was late November in the North Atlantic. The Mary Celeste, under the sails that were still drawing, sailed away from them faster than 9 people could row. Here is where I think this story goes wrong, and it has nothing to do with ghosts. Briggs made a defensible decision with broken instruments, and the sea killed him for it. The world could not accept that. It wanted a locked room. So a novelist gave it one in 1884, and a liar filled it with people who never existed in 1929, and we have been repeating them both ever since. In 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers walked out of a tower on a rock in the North Atlantic and left a spotless kitchen behind them. And no, the door was not locked.